Well, today we're back at the Hall of History and we're going to look at how the U.S. acquired the islands of Hawaii. If the islands were important to the U.S. as really as late as the 1700s as a fuel and supply stop. The islands, as you well know, are in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and ships traveling from the United States to the Orient and from the Orient back would need to refuel and resupply their provisions, and Hawaii made a very nice stop. Pearl Harbor was a natural harbor, and it protected the ships very well, and it was logical that this place would become a fuel depot. In the 1820s, American missionaries, as they would want to do, came to the islands to convert the Hawaiians to Christianity. You know, this kind of goes back to that whole idea later on as we saw imperialism, and, you know, the idea of the white man's burden. In the 50s, 1850s, American-owned sugar plantations really started to take off on the island. You know, tropical climate, great growing conditions, very fertile soil, seeing their volcanic islands, and a few years later, the U.S. sugar corporations really dominated the sugar trade. 1875, Americans set up a treaty that allowed American planters, and again, Hawaii was not a part of the United States, to sell the sugar to the U.S. without a tax. Before this, you would have import taxes, tariff taxes to protect the trade, protect the corporations that were on American soil. But seeing there was Americans were really bringing the sugar in from Hawaii, that tax was repealed for coming out of the islands. By 1880, Hawaiians outnumber whites 3-1, and there was a kind of a takeover in 87. King Kalakaua to alter the voting system to favor the rich landowners. And yeah, it was really the economics behind the throne that really allowed this takeover, where only the rich landowners really could vote. In 87, also, Pearl Harbor is granted to the U.S. The naval base is granted to the U.S. and a naval base is built. And there's a picture from about that time period. Again, the king really didn't have a whole lot of choice in this matter, as it was really the large, wealthy white plantation owners that really were calling the shots. If you want to go back to that whole idea of Tammany Hall and the idea of the political machine, well, it was really going on here. In 1890, the McKinley Tariff raises the price of foreign Hawaiian sugar. Well, now you had to do something else. So what ends up happening, the king finally died, or did die, in 1891, and his sister, Queen Liliuokalani, took over, and she proposed an amendment to allow the native Hawaiians to get their political power back. Well, as you can probably guess, that the American businessmen did not like this to happen. And so they actually organized a revolt against the Queen, the U.S. ambassador, and some Marines came ashore. And in January 16th, 1893, the Marines showed up to protect American lives and property, which was really a ruse just to get them on the island. Also at this time, the ambassador Stevens and Sanford B. Dole, and that you are correct, that is the Dole pineapple, organized the revolution on the 16th. And the Marines came and they forced the Queen to abdicate or to leave the throne. Dole became the president of the it was called a Pineapple Republic, and then he immediately turned around and asked the U.S. to take Hawaii. Well, you know, let's face it, this was done for purely economic reasons. If we were part of the United States, the sugar plantations would not have to pay the tariff tax, and therefore the businessmen on the island can make more money. In 1898, Congress proclaimed Hawaii as a U.S. territory. Interesting note, my parents were in the Marine Corps there in the early 50s were married there, and on their marriage license it showed that is the territory of Hawaii, as it was not a state yet. Also, it's interesting, the native Hawaiians were never really asked what they thought and were never allowed to vote on the issue. So you think about Hawaii, it was purely economic and also military, as the naval base at Pearl Harbor proved to be a logical military strategic place to for ships, naval ships to refuel, replenish, and protect the shipping lanes in the Pacific Ocean. A quick side note on Alaska. This was pretty much just a straight purchase. It was purchased from the Russians for about 7.2 million in 1867. If I remember correctly, in today's dollars, it was about 120 million dollars. U.S. Secretary of State William Seward negotiated the deal. It was originally called Seward's Folly. Well, it's interesting. At the time it was thought to be just a wasteland, but all the natural resources and the gold, not to mention all the TV shows on Discovery and History Channel lately about Alaska. And Alaska really turned out to be literally and figuratively a gold mine. Little interesting sidelight, my son's in the military, and he's been stationed either in Fairbanks or Anchorage for about 10 of his 18 years in the military. He's a paratrooper. And as you finish this lecture up, do you think this was a good deal for the United States to purchase this? And we'll talk about that in class. So that ends today's lecture.